Breathing in, I'm aware of my body. You bring your mind home to your body.
"5,000 years of silence hide in a single breath. You inhale and the air seems to hum. You exhale and something unseen stirs in every cell." The 111 breaths technique isn't just an exercise, it's a spark that awakens the body's hidden resonance. With each cycle, energy rises. Subtle vibrations you never noticed before begin to hum through your spine, your heart, your mind. Time bends, focus sharpens, and the world feels denser, richer, alive. This isn't gradual, it's instant. One intentional rhythm of breath, and the vibration that was dormant inside you now surges, palpable, undeniable, waiting to expand. A whisper from the ancients. There are secrets that never made it into books. They travelled instead through voices, through the careful passing of sound and breath between teacher and student. Not because they were too fragile to be written, but because the act of writing might have stripped them of their living quality. A teaching that moves by whisper carries something of the sacred. It's alive, shifting as it meets each listener, like fire leaping from torch to torch. Among these whispers, some practices survived thousands of years, outliving kingdoms, deserts, and floods. They endured because the human heart has always searched for ways to remember its own light. While empires fell and cities turned to dust, seekers kept these techniques safe in their bodies. One such practice was known not by a grand title, but by a simple rhythm. 111 breaths, drawn with intention. It sounds disarmingly ordinary, just breathing. Yet those who tried it spoke of a strange quickening, a vibration rising through their chest and crown, a doorway opening into stillness that felt charged and alive. Breath, after all, has always been more than the act of staying alive. Taoist masters called it the thread of life, the invisible cord weaving together body and spirit. They taught that to follow this thread inward was to find the place where heaven and earth touch. In distant lands, yogis spoke in their own tongue of prana, the subtle energy carried by every inhalation. For them, breath was not only air, it was cosmic vitality flowing through the human vessel. To master prana was to master one's vibration, to awaken sleeping forces within. A breath taken with awareness became a seed of transformation, able to shift the whole field of being. Think for a moment about how fragile and yet how constant breath is. We hardly notice it until it falters. It slips in and out like a tide, drawing us unconsciously into the rhythm of existence. And yet, hidden inside this most ordinary act, sages saw a portal. They believed that by shaping it, by counting it, guiding it, weaving it into patterns, one could touch realms of awareness that words fail to describe. The practice of 111 breaths rests on this insight. Not 10, not 100, but 111. Why such a number? Those who preserved it rarely gave reasons in the way modern science demands. They would simply say, it is the rhythm of alignment. To them it was self-evident, like the way certain stones fit perfectly together without mortar, or the way a bird knows where to fly when seasons turn. Imagine an old temple at dawn, stone walls cool with night air. A disciple kneels, instructed by his master to inhale, to exhale, again and again, never rushing, never counting aloud. Somewhere beyond the repetition, the ordinary falls away. Thought slows. The heart finds another kind of time. By the 100th breath, the boundary between self and silence thins, and by the 111th, something opens. Perhaps this is why such a fragile practice survived. Because it worked. Because anyone willing to sit with patience could taste its truth directly, without needing belief or doctrine. The technique did not belong to one religion or culture. It slipped through borders like the wind itself. In Taoist villages, in Indian ashrams, in forgotten desert gatherings, the rhythm of breath carried seekers into the same quiet fire. What does it mean that something so simple has lasted 5 millennia? It suggests that the ancients knew a secret we've overlooked in our chase for complexity, that the body already holds the key, waiting in the soft rise and fall of lungs. They saw breath not as a servant to survival, but as a bridge, connecting flesh to spirit, noise to silence, earth to sky. And so the whispers reach us even now. They say that to change your state, to raise your vibration, you do not need elaborate rituals or rare initiations. You need only what you already carry, the breath moving through you, invisible yet eternal. Perhaps this is why the old masters insisted that the first true doorway into hidden wisdom can only be found in the breath. Breath, the forgotten doorway. Every inhale is a quiet miracle, though most people rush through life without noticing it. The chest rises, the lungs expand, and something unseen passes into the body. Air, yes, but hidden within it, an energy too subtle to measure, too essential to dismiss. The ancients were certain that breath was more than a bodily function. It was the invisible doorway between matter and spirit, a threshold we cross countless times each day without realizing we're moving through sacred space. In old Sufi gatherings, breath was treated as prayer. Their mystics called it breathing remembrance, each inhalation and exhalation an act of recalling the divine. To breathe with awareness was to allow God to live within you, not as a thought, but as a living presence. Silence would fall in those rooms, and all that remained was the shared sound of breathing. Like an invisible choir, harmonizing not with voices, but with the pulse of existence itself. Some Sufis even taught that every breath we take either lifts us closer to remembrance or drags us deeper into forgetfulness, making awareness of the breath nothing less than a spiritual compass. The Dogon people of Africa carried a similar reverence, though their language for it was different. In their cosmology, breath was not something humans merely received. It was the very first divine gift, woven into creation itself. They believed the world was born when the Creator exhaled, and every breath since then echoes that primordial moment. To draw air into one's lungs was to participate again in the act of creation, a renewal that never stopped. Science in its modern form has tried to reduce breath to chemistry. Oxygen, carbon dioxide, the mechanics of gas exchange. But even physicians quietly admit that breathing has strange effects on the mind that numbers alone cannot capture. Slow the breath, and thoughts begin to soften. Deepen it, and emotions begin to shift, sometimes without reason. Patterns in the lungs become patterns in the soul. It's no wonder mystics across cultures treated the breath not as biology, but as sacred language. Even modern neuroscience now observes how controlled breathing reshapes brainwaves, tilting them toward calm, focus, and sometimes even altered states once thought possible only for advanced meditators. Notice how quickly the mood changes when the breath is shallow and rushed. Anxiety grows, the body tenses, the mind loses focus. Now compare it to the long, steady inhale of a singer before releasing sound, or the full exhale of someone who finally feels safe. Breath writes the script for the body, and the body responds in kind. The forgotten doorway has always been right here, guiding the tempo of awareness itself. There are stories of wanderers who, lost in desert silence, learned to count their breaths to stay awake through long nights. Somewhere along the way, the counting turned into meditation, the meditation into vision. By watching the breath closely, they discovered that the space between inhale and exhale holds a peculiar stillness, a gap in which the self seems to dissolve. That gap became their teacher, and yet, as powerful as breath is, it rarely calls attention to itself. It's modest, it asks for nothing, gives without hesitation, and continues its rhythm even when we forget it exists. Perhaps that humility is what makes it so easily overlooked. In our search for miracles, we miss the one moving silently in and out of us every moment. The ancients would have said the miracle is not hidden at all. It waits patiently in plain sight, like a lamp whose glow becomes visible only when we finally dim the noise around it. But seekers of old did not overlook it. They trained themselves to listen to breath as one might listen to music. Each inhale was a note, each exhale its echo. In time, they learned to shape the rhythm, to guide it into patterns that altered not just their minds, but their entire vibration. Breath became a language of transformation, written not with ink, but with life itself. Which brings us closer to the mystery of numbers. Many traditions tied breath not only to spirit, but to sacred rhythm. Certain counts were said to unlock hidden states, aligning human awareness with cosmic patterns. Among those, the number 111 stood apart, not as an arbitrary tally, but as a code woven into the heartbeat of spiritual practice. And so the question lingers in the air. Why did so many cultures mark this rhythm, and what secret hides in the count of 111 breaths? The mystery of 111. Numbers have always carried more than quantity. For the mystics, they were carriers of meaning, pulses of the unseen woven into the structure of the universe. To look at 111 through their eyes is to see not arithmetic, but alignment. 3 pillars standing together, each echoing the other, forming a pattern of unity. Across traditions, repeating numbers were treated as signs, not coincidences. A single one marked the beginning, a point of origin. But when it repeats, when 1 becomes 3, something shifts. It ceases to be just a symbol of individuality and becomes a symbol of harmony. 3 mirrors side by side mirror the triad of human experience, mind, body and spirit moving as one current. The Greek philosopher Pythagoras spoke often about numbers as vibration, each integer carrying its own frequency. He claimed that to understand numbers was to hear the music of the cosmos, a song inaudible to ordinary ears but still shaping the world. Imagine how he might have seen 111, not as a simple count, but as a resonance, a triple note sounding the same pitch, reinforcing itself into clarity. Ancient numerologists believed that 111 was not just a symbol of beginnings, but also a signal that unseen forces were aligning events in your favour. In Vedic traditions, repetition was equally sacred. The chanting of mantras, often repeated 108 or more times, was not done for memory's sake, but to align the practitioner with cosmic rhythm. Repetition itself was power. To breathe 111 times with intention carries the same wisdom. The number is not arbitrary, but a vessel of alignment, a rhythm carved into the structure of the invisible. Think of how nature reveals patterns in repetition. Waves crash in a steady rhythm. The beating heart echoes a cycle of threes: expand, contract, rest. Even DNA spirals in triple helices. Everywhere we look, creation hides its laws in sequences that repeat. 111 belongs to this language, and those who practiced the technique treated it as a cipher unlocking resonance between the human and the universal. Mystics often describe such moments as a thinning of the veil, when the ordinary world briefly reveals its hidden architecture. Stories tell of seekers who sat in silence, guided by teachers who spoke little but showed much. "Count until the rhythm carries you," they would whisper, and always the number was 111. The student might begin with effort, each breath measured, but somewhere in the process, effort turned to flow. The number, once external, began to feel like something alive inside the body, a current pulling awareness towards stillness. Skeptics might ask, why not 100 and why not 120? But that is the mind looking for mechanical reasons. The mystics were not engineers, they were listeners. They observed how certain numbers echoed through dream, geometry and song. 111 emerged not from preference but from recognition, as though reality itself had whispered, "This is the rhythm of union." Something is mesmerizing about the symmetry of 111. Written, it looks like 3 mirrors placed side by side. Some have even called it a doorway, a portal where one reality reflects into another. And perhaps that is what practitioners felt. As the breaths mounted, awareness passed through a threshold, leaving behind ordinary thought and entering a mirrored silence, infinitely reflecting itself. Consider also the role of intention. A number alone is only a mark on a page, but aligned with conscious breath, it becomes alive. Ancient teachers knew that counting was a way to anchor awareness, to bind the wandering mind into a single channel. To focus for 111 breaths was to train the spirit in concentration, to create a vessel strong enough to hold vibration. This is why many spiritual teachers warn that noticing 111 comes with responsibility. For if your thoughts shape reality, then alignment demands conscious choice, not drifting. Mystics often spoke in parables, and one tale tells of a sage who asked his student to strike a single note on a stringed instrument. The sound was plain. Then he asked the student to strike it again and again. By the third repetition, the note shimmered differently, vibrating with hidden depth. "Do you see?" the sage asked. "It is the same sound, but it grows stronger through alignment." 111 breaths work the same way. Each repetition deepens the resonance, until the ordinary breath begins to glow with extraordinary presence. With each breath counted, the number stops being theory and begins to reveal its rhythm, a rhythm that quietly waits to be entered. The rhythm of spirit. At first, the breath feels ordinary, a rise and fall of the chest, a small current entering and leaving. But once the mind accepts the rhythm of counting, one, then another, the air begins to feel charged. The body shifts in ways that are difficult to explain. Each inhale sharpens attention, each exhale dissolves a layer of noise, and what was once background begins to glow with presence. Awareness stretches wider than before. Some describe a tingling at the fingertips, others a warmth spreading through the spine. It is not imagination. Physiologists tell us that deliberate breathing changes oxygen flow, balances carbon dioxide, and alters heart rhythms, which in turn shape the nervous system. Yet the mystics would simply say, keep breathing, and the spirit will reveal its own pulse. The Tibetan yogis of old carried this secret with discipline. In frozen caves they practiced tummo breath, summoning inner heat until snow melted around them. To outsiders it seemed impossible, even magical. But to those who had learned the art, it was only a demonstration of what the breath can unlock when attention is bound to rhythm. One breath is fragile. 111, in unbroken sequence, becomes a force. Something curious happens after the first 20 or 30 breaths. The ordinary chatter of thought, which usually pulls awareness in 10 directions, begins to weaken. By the halfway point, silence grows thicker, like a hidden room opening inside the chest. Scientists studying meditation have noticed similar thresholds. Certain brain waves diminish, others rise, until patterns shift into states often described as flow or expanded presence. Electroencephalogram studies even reveal bursts of coherence in the brain, as if scattered signals suddenly begin moving in harmony with each other. The yogis spoke of it differently. They said the spirit begins to breathe you rather than you breathing the spirit. There is no striving required. The count does the work, the rhythm carries the mind, and the body learns what surrender feels like without collapse. Ancient texts hint that repetition cleanses the inner channels as though dust were blown from the corridors of perception. Modern language calls it resetting the nervous system, lowering cortisol, rebalancing the brain. The words differ, but the lived effect is strangely the same. Clarity enters, heaviness leaves. A seeker once told his teacher, "I feel light pouring from my fingertips after the practice." The teacher only smiled. Mystics rarely explain what must be experienced. To breathe 111 times in rhythm is to discover that life itself can become luminous, even without visions or revelations. For some, the rhythm produces a sensation like being gently expanded beyond the edges of the body, as though awareness itself were no longer contained by skin or bone. It is the quietest transformations that stay with us longest. The soft glow after the fire, the silence after the bell. Yet there is a shadow here too. The same breath that awakens can also stir what has been hidden. Old memories rise, emotions surface. The body trembles with energies it has long suppressed. Tibetan yogis knew this well. They warned students not to play with breath like a toy, but to respect it as a doorway. Breath magnifies what you carry, and without care it can overwhelm as easily as it can heal. Still, when guided by a steady rhythm and clear intention, the practice becomes an anchor. Each counted breath is a reminder. Stay present, stay aligned. It is this rhythm that slowly trains the mind to move differently, not rushing, not wandering, but pulsing with the same quiet certainty as the heartbeat. Psychologists studying breathwork in clinics have found that patients emerge with sharper focus, greater calm, and even shifts in mood after only minutes of deliberate breathing. What science calls a therapeutic technique, the mystics call remembrance. Toward the final stretch, 90, 95, 100, awareness sharpens in a new way. The number no longer feels like an external marker. It has woven itself into the breath, and the breath into the awareness, until all three blur. Practitioners often speak of an invisible stillness that arises in these last counts, as though the boundary between inside and outside had thinned. A small crack opens in the ordinary, and through it, the spirit begins to sing its rhythm. That leaves the lingering wonder. If such a simple act shifts us so deeply, what hidden design in reality responds to these breaths? waiting for us to step through. Vibration and the human field. Every thought carries a subtle pulse, every breath a quiet hum. These vibrations ripple through the body, sometimes unnoticed, sometimes palpable, shaping mood, focus, and energy. Nikola Tesla once said, "If you want to understand the universe, think in terms of energy, frequency, and vibration." And if Tesla is right, then the human body itself is a symphony of frequencies, each cell a tiny oscillator, each heartbeat a drum of resonance. When we practice 111 intentional breaths, the rhythm acts like a tuning fork. Each inhale amplifies the body's natural oscillations, each exhale clears interference. The field of energy surrounding the body, what yogis call prana, begins to vibrate in alignment with the breath. Subtle currents strengthen, and the ordinary sense of self begins to expand into something wider, more fluid, more alive. Yogic stories speak of practitioners whose prana awakened after sustained breath practice. Their hands glowed with warmth, their minds sharpened with clarity, and their awareness seemed to extend beyond the edges of the body. The energy field became not just a theoretical concept, but a living experience, a luminous halo pulsing in rhythm with the breath. Ancient teachers would smile, knowing that this field, when aligned, could act as a bridge to higher states. Science offers a curious echo of these teachings. Studies in biofield research have observed subtle electromagnetic changes during controlled breathing and meditation. Heart rate variability shifts, skin conductance alters, and brain waves move in coordinated patterns. It is as if the human organism is capable of tuning itself, responding to intentional rhythm, each breath creating coherence where before there was only noise. Imagine for a moment a tuning fork struck beside a stringed instrument. The string, initially quiet, begins to vibrate in sympathy. The human field reacts in much the same way. When 111 breaths are counted with focus, the body and mind enter resonance, and subtle energies that usually operate below perception come into alignment. Thoughts, emotions, even memories can recalibrate, reshaping the field with a gentle, steady pulse. Seekers have long described this as a tangible sensation. Some feel a vibration in the chest or head, a humming that seems to originate outside the body yet vibrates within. Some practitioners report feeling subtle shifts in their vision, as if the world's colours and shapes are vibrating slightly differently, more alive, more coherent. Others notice a gentle warmth along the spine, a sign that energy is moving through channels long thought dormant. Some people also notice an expanded presence, as though the boundaries of the self have softened, becoming permeable to the world around them. This is the human field responding, adjusting to the rhythm of intention, rising into harmonic alignment. These subtle sensations are often accompanied by a heightened sensitivity to sound and light, as if the senses themselves are attuning to a higher frequency. The interplay between inner and outer vibration is not just a mystical theory. It underlies the principle that we are constantly exchanging energy with our surroundings. Our breath, our focus, our movement, each creates waves that extend beyond the skin, influencing spaces, objects, and even other people nearby. In this sense, 111 breaths function not just as self-transformation, but as a tuning of the entire energetic environment around the practitioner. Some stories take this further. Yogis tell of travellers who, after days of rhythmically counted breath, could sense the subtle currents of prana in trees, water, and stone. They moved as though guided by invisible threads, reading vibration as one might read a map. Breath, in these accounts, becomes more than life support. It is the instrument through which consciousness tunes itself to the underlying frequency of existence. What is remarkable is the immediacy of this effect. Within minutes, the field begins to shift, the hum becomes palpable, and ordinary perception subtly transforms. Each breath reinforces the next, building a resonance that is cumulative and self-reinforcing. Over time, repeated practice can make this state more accessible, turning the ordinary breath into a portal for subtle energetic calibration. Awareness rises, inner stillness deepens, and the vibratory state achieved begins to ripple outward, connecting body, mind, and subtle energy in a harmonious current. In that quiet hum, the human field seems to pulse with a question only experience can answer. Mystics who breathe the infinite. A Zen master once sat with a student whose anger had boiled over. The master said nothing, only guided him to watch his breath. One long, deliberate inhale, one slow exhale, and the fire in the student's chest dissolved. Not through argument, not through reasoning, but through attention to the rhythm of life moving quietly through the body. Breath became the doorway, and in that doorway, a small freedom appeared. Rumi, the Sufi mystic, described breath as prayer itself. Each inhalation is a welcome, each exhalation is a letting go. He wrote that when we breathe with presence, the heart learns to speak without words, connecting to the unseen. The mystic's path was not about doing more, but about noticing what was always happening, life moving in and out of us, sacred and ordinary all at once. In the deserts, mystics practiced long repetitions, counting breaths under the relentless sun. Hours would pass, yet the body seemed to vanish, and the mind opened to visions of the infinite. Some fell into trance, others into clarity that sharpened every sense. What began as a simple count became a bridge, uniting the inner and outer, the fleeting self and the eternal current. Stories tell of monks who would sit for days, inhaling and exhaling with such precision that even the wind seemed to pause in respect. They did not aim for miracles, they aimed for presence, and presence, sustained over time, carried them beyond ordinary perception. They walked among the living, but glimpsed a horizon invisible to those untrained in rhythm and attention. Sufi orders often taught the same principle with music and movement, pairing breath with chant or whirling. The breath became a guide, a thread connecting body, mind, and spirit. Students learned to surrender to the rhythm without losing themselves, and in the surrender they discovered the infinite in the finite. Rumi's words echo through centuries. Be like a tree and let the dead leaves drop. Breathing with awareness, even anger, fear, or longing falls away, leaving only the essential pulse of life. A mystic in a mountain cave once said that a single, conscious breath could contain the universe. To the untrained, it sounded hyperbolic, almost impossible. Yet those who practiced long enough reported shifts in perception, a sense that the boundaries of the body were permeable, the walls between self and world thin, and every breath a thread weaving them into something larger. The act itself was ordinary, but its effects were extraordinary. Even in historical accounts, we see breath as a doorway to insight. A desert mystic might enter a trance through repetition. A Zen monk might dissolve sorrow in one moment of attention. Across cultures, the method was strikingly similar. The breath is not merely life's engine, but the lens through which higher awareness is perceived. The rhythm itself becomes a teacher, showing what words cannot capture. Some mystics spoke of physical sensations accompanying these shifts, tingling at the fingertips, a gentle warmth rising along the spine, subtle pulses in the chest. Others noticed a heightened sensitivity to sound, light, and even emotions around them, as though their field of perception had expanded outward. Some reported that entire moments would seem to stretch and expand, each second infused with a sense of sacred timing. They described a subtle synchrony between heartbeat, breath, and thought, as if the inner rhythms of body and mind were suddenly speaking the same language. In the stillness between breaths, the ordinary and extraordinary blended seamlessly, leaving only a luminous thread of presence connecting every inhalation to the next. These experiences, while personal, echoed across traditions, suggesting a universal principle. The rhythm of breath can attune consciousness to dimensions beyond ordinary perception. Modern seekers, encountering these stories, often wonder, is such mastery accessible today? Can we, in the midst of offices, cities, and screens, weave the ancient art into our days? The answer is quieter than expected. Breath is always present. The path is in noticing, in repetition, in allowing the pulse of life to guide awareness, even for a few moments. The mystics teach that every attentive inhale and exhale carries the same potential if we are willing to follow it. In observing those who have touched the infinite, a subtle truth begins to whisper. Perhaps the doorway they found is not distant, but quietly waiting in the very next breath we take. Returning to the present moment. Even after glimpses of infinite presence, the question lingers, how do we bring it into everyday life? The breath that once carried us beyond the ordinary can now serve as an anchor. With 111 intentional breaths, we do not escape the world. we step fully into it, carrying the vibration we've stirred into our waking moments. Each inhalation sharpens clarity, each exhale releases tension, and the mind begins to settle into a rhythm it rarely knows. Modern mindfulness practices echo what mystics taught centuries ago. Sitting quietly, following the breath, noticing sensations, sounds, and thoughts, these are distilled forms of the same ancient rhythm. Jung's idea of synchronicity reminds us that life responds to resonance. When our inner field aligns, patterns emerge, and what once seemed random can feel like dialogue with the unseen, subtle, and precise. The technique becomes practical as much as mystical. Starting the 111 breaths in the morning can set the tone for the day, while practicing during moments of overwhelm restores composure. The body softens, mental noise quiets, intuition sharpens. Some notice that even a single session of 111 breaths can subtly shift the tone of their entire day, like tuning a musical instrument before a performance. Ordinary tasks, walking, washing dishes, even typing, begin to carry awareness, turning mundane moments into small vessels filled with light. Breath anchors without withdrawing, it centers without effort. Repeated practice shapes more than personal energy, it influences relationships, work, and creativity. A calm, aligned mind perceives more opportunities, responds rather than reacts, and moves with quiet efficiency. The frequency cultivated individually ripples outward. One centered action touches another. One aligned moment reverberates into a larger field, subtle but tangible. Even the simplest moments transform. Waiting in line, walking to a bus, listening to a friend, each can be infused with presence through attentive breathing. Breath, both literal and symbolic, bridges body and consciousness, the tangible and unseen. 111 breaths condense centuries of mystical practice into a short, accessible ritual available to anyone willing to enter the pulse of life. The practice reconnects us to creativity. With a clear mind and elevated vibration, ideas surface effortlessly. Insights once hidden in mental clutter now emerge naturally, like sunlight through mist. Jung might say this is resonance with archetypal currents, the same principle that guided mystics into insight, vision, and understanding beyond ordinary perception. There is subtle humility in this method. Breath does not guarantee extraordinary results, yet it opens a field where subtlety and presence are honoured. Patience and trust are cultivated, trust in the body, in rhythm, in life itself. Alignment ripples from the inside outward, creating harmony within mind, body, and surroundings without forcing outcomes. Even small applications amplify the effect. Pausing before a meeting, before a difficult conversation, before sleep. These are invitations to reset energy, recalibrate vibration, and choose presence. The rhythm of the breath becomes a companion, silently guiding thought, intention, and emotional tone. Over time, what begins as a brief practice seeps into the subconscious, shaping the way we perceive, act, and respond. Applying 111 breaths in daily life transforms ordinary moments into gateways. Work, relationships, and chores. They can all become infused with awareness and elevated vibration. The practice becomes portable, a sanctuary that recalibrates energy anytime, anywhere, without external ritual or apparatus. Awareness deepens when the rhythm is carried into ordinary life. Moments of stillness within movement, clarity within chaos, and subtle connection with life's pulse begin to emerge. Energy becomes both personal and shared, like threads quietly weaving together, forming a field of subtle resonance that reaches beyond the self. Even in a crowded city street or a noisy office, the practice remains possible. One can close eyes for a breath, feel the subtle energy in the chest, notice the tingling of fingers, the pulse at the temples, and let the vibration settle. The subtle sensations, the warmth in the chest, the expansion behind the eyes, the gentle pulse in the limbs, become markers of presence, reminding us that awareness is tangible, not abstract. These tiny alignments ripple outward, shifting perception, softening judgment, and inviting the extraordinary into the ordinary. With every inhale and exhale guiding awareness to the present, a quiet invitation emerges, hinting at what could unfold next. A world that breathes together. Imagine a room filled with people, each inhaling and exhaling in quiet unison. The air itself seems to hum with shared rhythm, subtle vibrations threading through every body, linking heartbeats and awareness. Indigenous communities have long practiced collective breathing before ceremonies, sensing that when the group breathes together, something shifts. The ordinary becomes sacred, and time itself feels stretched and alive. Even the simplest rhythm, when shared, carries power beyond comprehension, like a chord struck and held in resonance. Teilhard de Chardin envisioned humanity awakening together, a planetary consciousness flowering in subtle harmony. What if breath could be a practical tool for such alignment? One person breathing with presence can shift their own vibration. A circle of people, each tuned into the rhythm, amplifies this resonance. And when multiplied across neighbourhoods, cities, even nations, the effect is not metaphorical. It becomes a felt energetic field, a web of subtle coherence connecting millions. Breath, in this sense, is both intimate and universal. It starts as a personal practice, 111 breaths, mindful and intentional, but its influence radiates outward. Imagine starting a morning ritual with a few friends, feeling the pulse of shared alignment. Each inhale is a thread, each exhale a release. The group begins to move as one organism, not in perfect synchronicity, but in resonant harmony, where individual differences do not break the field but enrich it. Even a single smile or a shared pause can magnify the invisible threads binding the participants. Stories from indigenous rituals illustrate the power of this collective energy. Before hunts, before dances, tribes would pause to breathe together, chanting, inhaling, exhaling. Eyes would close, hearts would slow, and awareness would expand. The collective field of energy became palpable. Courage, focus, and clarity were shared, flowing invisibly from one to another. Breath became both instrument and teacher, binding the community in subtle yet undeniable ways. The sensation of connectedness often lingered long after the ceremony, a gentle hum under everyday life. If a single person can feel shifts after 111 breaths, imagine the multiplier effect of dozens, hundreds, or thousands practicing together. The principle is simple. Vibration is contagious, presence is magnetic, energy aligns when attention is unified, even subtly. A city park at sunrise, a school classroom, or a workplace lunchroom could become small sanctuaries of resonance, reminding us that alignment is not rare. It can be cultivated. Even a brief session can create a ripple effect, where the calm and focus generated by one group subtly influences others nearby, like a stone disturbing the surface of a still pond. And within these pockets, small transformations ripple outward, subtly influencing moods, interactions, and the unseen energy around us. Teilhard de Chardin's vision was not purely abstract. He suggested that humanity itself could awaken in stages, a collective expansion of consciousness. Breath is a concrete bridge to this potential. Through 111 breaths, individuals can anchor awareness, and together these anchors form networks of coherence. What begins in solitude can ripple outward, touching others who are not even aware of the source, like sunlight diffusing through morning mist. Even the subtle awareness of a neighbour sensing calm or focus may be part of the unseen symphony created by collective breath. Some communities have discovered that coordinated breathing before gatherings fosters empathy and cooperation, softening tensions that words alone cannot resolve. Modern science begins to hint at the invisible effects of shared intention. Studies show that heart rate, breathing patterns, and even brain waves can synchronize within groups engaged in mindful or meditative practices. The mystical and the measurable meet here. What indigenous tribes sensed intuitively, and what mystics whispered across centuries, is increasingly being observed in subtle physiological fields. Energy does move. It can resonate. It can be shared. In practical terms, the invitation is simple. Find a space, alone or with others. Inhale with attention. Exhale with presence. Count 111 breaths. Notice what shifts, physical, emotional, mental, or subtle. Observe how awareness begins to extend beyond your body, how the ordinary feels imbued with resonance, how connection with others becomes more palpable even without words. The experience is not limited to formal rituals. Even in formal moments, a group of friends pausing together on a walk can create a shared vibrational field that is tangible and energizing. Allow small sensations, a warming in the chest, a subtle tingling in fingers, the quiet of the mind to guide you. Through the gentle rise and fall of each breath, the quiet rhythm of presence opens, suggesting a world where each inhale and exhale carries the possibility of shared awakening. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you felt inspired, give this video a like, share your thoughts in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more ways to explore the power of your breath and presence.